Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to this postmortem of my Blitz game number 651. This was an interesting game, had something for all phases, I guess. So let's talk about the opening first. I went for d4. My opponent goes d5, and I go for the Queen's Gambit declined. And then my opponent plays knight f6, one of the lesser played defenses to the Queen's Gambit, known as the Marshall defense. And actually, this is not a good move, and the way you refute it is not to follow the opening book. Knight f3 here just transposes back into a main line of some sort, so it's not really a move at this point if you're trying for an advantage. But take that pawn. Take that pawn, and he takes back with the knight. And actually, I've looked at this with the chess engine. I was kind of trying to rehabilitate the Marshall defense at some point. The chess engine says the best move here for black is actually to play c6 and turn this into a gambit. So pawn takes, knight takes, and I've tried this gambit a couple of times, but I think black probably does not have enough compensation. So I think basically there's nothing good to be said for the Marshall defense. Anyway, most people take back with the knight. If you take back with the queen, you run into the same issues. Whatever piece ends up on the d5 square, black loses a tempo because that's going to get kicked away. I'm going to play e4 immediately, but instead of playing e4 immediately, it's better to play knight to f3 first. And what this does is it eliminates counterplay from black playing e5. So if you can remember those two things, you can defend against the Marshall defense. You can get a good game against the Marshall defense. So take the pawn first, then play knight f3 so he can't play e5. And now you're going to play e4 in the next move and kick that knight away. And the key idea here is you want to play e4 before you develop the knight so that there's no target here on c3 for that knight to hit. And that's what makes this different from something like the Grinfeld. Like black could try and transpose into a Grinfeld with a move like g6, and if you play knight to c3 followed by e4, we'd be back in a Grinfeld, which is quite playable for black. But that's because black takes off that knight, which gets rid of this problem piece with tempo, and this pawn structure turns out to be a little bit fragile that black can undermine it. But here there's no pawn damage. No piece to trade off, and the knight is just going to have to go back. So bishop to f5 is an interesting trying to stop the immediate e4 push. But well, that runs into a bit of trouble too. Knight b to d2 is a good move here, and you're just going to push that pawn forward and fork those two pieces. And the normal move here is for the knight to retreat either to b6 or to f6, and they're both about the same. And as we saw in the game, white has a big lead in development and a big center, and just has everything white could hope for out of the opening. Anyway, he played bishop to g4. We're just out of the opening book at this point. And I played e4, just following my normal plan against the Marshall defense. And it's a good move, keeping that advantage to white. But in this particular case, with bishop to g4, there's an even better move of knight to e5, which is something you should always think about when you see this bishop here. Can you play that move? There's no, I haven't moved the e-pawn, so there's no pin, and just kicking that bishop away would be the best way to play this. Yeah, later this pin becomes kind of annoying. So anyway, I played e4, which creates that pin, and that gives black a little something here, but white's still much better. Let's see, the knight went back to b6, and we get some normal development. I unpin, he plays e6. I'm going to go fast through some parts because it's a complicated, it's a long game. And yeah, it was complicated in parts. So h3, kicking the bishop, drops back, b3, preparing stop that, b3, preparing to develop my bishop, castles, bishop b2, knight to d7, bringing his knight into the game, rook to c1, and rook to c8. So all this is pretty standard. I've kept my advantage. The chess engine doesn't particularly like my e5 move here, although I think it has some idea, so I might still play this way. But it just wants to kind of sit on this position. Well, one thing it really wants to do is it wants to provoke a trade of the light squared bishop here. So its top choice was actually this funny move, knight e1, not one I would have considered at all. But Yeah, it does. Now that I'm looking at it, and also as I see what happened in the game, getting rid of that pin just forcefully and trading off that bishop, it is one of black's better pieces, and my bishop isn't doing a whole lot there. So in retrospect, I think that makes a lot of sense. Another move suggested by the engine is rook to c2. This, I guess, maybe it's preparing to double on the c file, put some pressure on that pawn. I don't know, a little hard to understand that move. But I played e5. So the game continues. He goes f6, although the chess engine says the best way for black to equalize here is to go in with knight d5, which is what I was thinking of. I was thinking of, I realized I was giving away this d5 square, but I was thinking I would get the e4 square. But this bishop drops back here, puts pressure on that undefended knight, and I would defend it, and then his knight drops into f4. And this is the key move for black in this position. If he can get the knight to f4, and this shows up later in the game, then black is actually better. So this is a line where black is better than white. Let's see. And once again, the chess engine wants to just go knight e1. It doesn't like my knight e4 plan at all because of that knight f4 move from black. So that's a theme to keep in mind here. Instead, he pushed on with f6, so I keep my edge. He takes. I take, he takes. And my advantage here is, I still have a little extra space in the center, and I have a target on e6. Let's see, he played knight e4. And sorry, it's my turn. I played knight e4, yeah. That's a move I'd been intending to play. Hitting that bishop, he goes knight to d5 here. And I just took that bishop off, which I think is okay. But knight e5 is probably even better, another chess engine suggestion. Just get both those knights in the center, also provoking this trade. Getting rid of that bishop. And now when the knight hops into f4, queen to e3 here. And, he's got to defend that knight or move it again. This is a bit of a tricky position still. Well, I guess what's good is my knight is controlling this square, so he can't move his bishop there and defend the knight that way. Anyway, the chess engine likes white in this position still. I took off the bishop here. I thought that was a good piece to get rid of. He took back and just developed my rook. Plays knight to f4. And this knight f4, like I said, this is a key move. And now I think black is pretty equal. And actually, after bishop to c4, black is better. So bishop to c4 was a mistake. What he had here was an opportunity to play the move this other knight, knight 6 to d5. So he keeps the knight on f4, parks this knight on a good square, and the chess engine wants me to just give up my bishop for that knight, which I would have been reluctant to do. But let's see the advantages of this knight on f4. First of all, it's supported by the rook and also by this knight, so it's well posted there. I can't ever chase it away, or it seems difficult to chase it away with g3 because he can take on h3 with check. And my queen can't unpin, so this pin on the knight becomes kind of annoying. I mean, I want to play queen to d3 here to unpin the knight, but his knight is... I just meant to erase that arrow. His f4 knight is controlling these key squares where the queen might go to. Right? The queen might also try a maneuver like this to unpin while still defending the knight. But this knight on f4 prevents all of that. So this is a really good position for black, and the chess engine thinks black is just winning here. So let's back up. So instead of bishop c4, the engine wants to play something like bishop to a3. And I don't know if I want to go through this line. There's a lot of complications. The point is I still have good moves here, but bishop c4 isn't one of them. But then he just retreated this knight. He went this knight, the f knight, back to d5. Maybe he felt it was a little exposed there, but it just turns out it was fine there. So once again, I'm okay. Let's see. And I unpinned immediately. Actually, I'm more than okay because when he played that knight back, he left his e-pawn hanging, and I could have just grabbed that. I didn't have to unpin immediately. But, well, I'd been obsessing about this pin on the knight for a while, and I finally saw my chance to unpin, and I just played that move. But it was a bit hasty. Not like it's a losing move, but I just had a better move. Okay, he goes queen to d7. I went knight to g5, taking advantage of the unpin and putting pressure on that e6 pawn. bishop back to g6, kicking my queen, queen over to g3. So I'm keeping some kind of edge through all of this part of the game. He goes rook c to e8, bring it over to defend. I go h4, a6. So let's go through this part kind of quickly. Rook to e5, get to the next interesting bit. He kicks my bishop, and I decide to go ahead and trade here. And he took back with the knight. He could have considered taking with the pawn there, I think. I didn't check that. But that leads to kind of a dry position, but maybe it's a little more equal. Somehow I seem to come out with an advantage in this sequence. Let's see. He goes rook. Oh, I went rook c to e1. Yeah, I'm doubling my rook, still with the idea of pressuring that e-pawn. He goes rook to f6, defending it. And now knight to e4. So knight to e4, the chess engine doesn't like that one so much, although it has some logic to it. It forces a trade of this bishop, which had been kind of a thorn in my side, although maybe it wasn't doing so much there. Knight to f3, and he doubles here, and then h5. This was an interesting idea, harassing the bishop with the h-pawn, defended by the rook. And the bishop goes to f5, and that blocks the f-file. So it seems like he was building up some dangerous pressure on the f-file, but then this move kind of forces him to block it. And then bishop to a3, poking at his rook again, controlling the f8 square. So now the engine likes white in this position, but I would say it's a really complicated position, and things could go wrong for white here very easily too. This pawn here could be a weakness as well as a strength, but a very interesting way to play. Okay, so knight e4, he took it off, I took back. He goes c6, defending his knight. Went bishop to c1. I'm just bringing my bishop around to harass his rook. And let's see, he went queen over to f7, so I get this out, and rook to f5. Yeah, he just chased it away. Maybe he could have tried to hold on to it with rook to g6. That would have been an interesting idea there as well. But at this point, I spotted the tactic, and I can actually just take that pawn. I verified this later. This is all correct. The engine thinks actually he should take with the queen and go into this situation where he's got two rooks for a queen and I have the extra pawn. But there's still a slight edge to white in this position too. And sometimes it's easier to play with the queen than the two rooks, especially when there's lots of... the board is still kind of clogged up, so the rooks don't have big open lines. But anyway, that's the engine line. He played the more natural rook takes, and then here's the key idea. I come and queen on the check with the queen on the back rank, and if he blocks with the rook, I can just take it. And if he blocks with the queen, I can trade, and because that undefended his rook here, and then take it. So I get my rook back. So I've won a pawn, and so I have this one pawn advantage, which I keep into the endgame, although it's still a bit tricky. So anyway, let's go forward some moves here. He maneuvers his knight around. Yeah, we get in. This is kind of an interesting part of the game. It's basically a pawn capturing race. I'm attacking his pawns, he's attacking my pawns, and we both, I don't have enough pieces to defend all my pawns, and he doesn't have enough pieces to defend all of his pawns. So there's a frequent thing that you see in the endgame. You just start scooping up all the pawns, and as long as you can gather up as many pawns as your opponent does or more, then you should be okay. And that's turned out to be the case here, although this is really hard to calculate in advance, but I managed to stay a pawn up through this whole section. And then he maneuvers his knight around here. Okay, so this is the next kind of turning point in the game. I have an advantage here with the extra pawn, and I just go into this king and pawn endgame with the rooks. Rook and pawn endgame, I should call it. And that rook and pawn endgame is slightly better for white, but not necessarily winning. So to have the best chance of winning, I should keep my bishop on. And I just didn't see a good move. I might have been getting tired at this point too. But bishop to d2 is a good move. The bishop can reposition itself here if this knight ever goes away, help to defend this pawn, and the bishop would be well posted there. So keep the bishop on, make it a little more complicated, and push forward with the extra pawn, trying to utilize that advantage. That's the winning plan here. So king d2 is going into a rook and pawn endgame. He took my bishop, I take, and I am a pawn up, so I'm still going to push for the win, but there are definitely drawing chances for black in this kind of endgame. Let's see, he starts to reduce the pawns on the board, which is a good strategy for the defending player. Try to get rid of as many pawns as possible. And it's important that there are pawns on both sides of the board. This is what gives white the winning chances. If all the pawns were on the same side of the board, this would be a draw for black, definitely. But now it's hard to say if it's a win or a draw. If you put this on the chess engine, it's just too deep for it to look ahead and find out the answer. It just gives kind of a steady +1 advantage to white, which just means you've got that extra pawn. It doesn't mean that it sees a way to win. Okay, so anyway, I start attacking his pawn. He goes king e7, king f4, get my king into the game, chase his rook around, f3, get my pawns rolling, king d7. Now let's go forward some moves. It's a long game. He's kind of harassing my rook. I go here, and his h4 move is a mistake. So the in this position, the chess engine gives this line: rook to c4 check, hitting the king drops back, rook over to a4, getting rid of the pawn over here and giving up on the h-pawn this way. Takes. And now this is turned into some kind of race where his pawn is actually closer to queening than my pawns, but I have two of them, and there's still an edge to white here. But this would be a very difficult position to play, kind of a double-edged position. It might be one of those positions where both sides queen, but this would be best chances for black to defend, going for that kind of double-edged position. Anyway, he played h4, and I should have taken with the rook. That would have been better to keep my pawns together. Just wanted to point that out. I took with the pawn. Let's see, if I take with the rook, yeah, he can check, but my rook is defended there, so that doesn't do anything. He can attack my, I think that's what happens, is he attacks my pawn and I lose this pawn over here, and we get into a similar kind of race, but I'm a step ahead now, and I can start pushing these pawns. Okay, anyway, I took with the pawn. He went rook c4 check, came back to d3, and he brought his rook over here attacking my a-pawn, so I'm losing that anyway, and I push the f-pawn forward. And he took the wrong pawn here. He needs to go into that race condition, so once again he should try rook takes a3, and then try and race with this pawn against my two pawns over here. That's his best drawing chances. Okay, he took the f-pawn, and now this is close to winning. I don't know if I put this on the engine long enough for it to find the answer, but at this point the valuation for white starts to climb. Let's see, I played king to c3. I want to stop his pawn, protect this pawn with my king while keeping this threat over here on the h-file alive. He went rook to a4. I just defend. And then he went rook to f4. And yeah, this starts to, my advantage continues to increase with that move. He could try something like king to d8. I guess maybe getting the king inside the square of this pawn, preparing to come over here with the king to defend against it, and keeping the rook over here. And I don't know if I could manage to win this, but I would still try. I mean, I've got ideas here of pushing my rook forward and moving the pawn forward. So anyway, rook to f4, my advantage starts to increase. I can push this pawn forward. Comes over here to d7, and I went with the rook back to h8. That's right. King e7, and then I went rook to b8, attacking his pawn. And he could have tried, okay, and he went rook to f5, and this one is definitely losing. So after this, the trick is, if he goes here, I can just push my pawn forward. That's the key trick here. If he takes it, then I have this check and pick up the rook. So after rook to f5 here, he's actually losing. There's no way to save that, to prevent that pawn from queening. He has to give up his rook. What he could try here is rook f3 check, king b2. This is kind of an interesting line. The king approaches his rook, and let me see. Let me stay with the line given by the chess engine. So the king comes forward, and then at some point the rook gets chased away, and if it goes over to h2, then you can take and defend both pawns. So that's not particularly good. If it goes to f3 to attack this pawn, then you have this idea with this push, and now it's too late to get the pawn behind it because once again you have this trick, pushing that pawn all the way to the 7th rank with the king there. You've got the skewer defending the pawn. So these lines look good for white, but that's the best defense. Anyway, rook f5 is losing, and I push on. He went king f7, and once again rook h5 doesn't work because I just keep pushing. So he brings his king over, and he can't stop me from queening now. So let's just step through the rest of the game. It's now a routine win with the extra rook here, and he played on. Just get up to the final position of the board. He didn't try too hard. He just was allowing me to bait him in a very efficient way. So maybe he was a little disgusted that he had lost the game. It was a very interesting game, though. I thought had something in every phase of the game: the opening, the middle game, and the end game. Hope you guys enjoyed this. Leave any comments you have in the section below, and I will see you again soon. Bye.